you with this. My favorite Dr. King quote is, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." I always thought that it doesn't just bend.
George Viejo, the city of North Miami Beach. Claudia Cabela, the village of El Portal. We have Fire Chief Maurice Kemp, City of Miami Fire Department. Mr. Rich Black, Onyx Bank.
In Washington, we have a standard operating procedure. Whatever Frederica wants. Remarks to the young men here. You may not have known that about 6 months before school in Philadelphia, the speech was called, "What is Your Life's Blueprint?" And Dr. King, young men were likely asking themselves, what am I going to do with my life? And he told them, it doesn't matter what you do, what matters is how you do it. So Dr. King said, and I quote him, don't just set out to do a good job, set out to do such a good job that the living, the dead, or the unborn could not do any better. Be the best, tolerant, and compassionate future of our country. One of the roles that you assume by becoming one will take Dr. King's comments to heart. Congratulations to you, and God bless you.
That are here as well. I want you to imagine being this age you are now, maybe a year older or so, and believing in something so very lightly. And we throw around the word hero around very lightly. What I hope these young men will understand today is what you are sitting in the presence of a true American hero in Congressman Lewis, one of the most extraordinary figures in America. And so when we think about courage in the 21st century, courage is not being unafraid of having a negative story written about you or have people say nasty things about you. Courage is the willingness to stand up for your principles no matter what the consequences may be. The cause that he fought for is one that is truly as deeply American as any cause you can imagine. You understand that in the history of the world, everybody, for the most part,
very own State Attorney Catherine Fernandez-Rundle of the 11th Judicial Circuit Court of Florida will join us and offer some remarks this morning. Please come forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. Every year for the last 2 decades or more, I look forward to and feel honored being a part of this unity breakfast.
Individuals like these. But one thing I do know, anyone's impossible can become everyone's inevitable. Through inspired belief that there is no mountain too high, no valley too low, no river too deep, no wall too thick that will keep you from your dreams and your aspirations. Second, skill for knowing how to is important. But last, the most important one, will. And will is the power. And when is the right time to do the right thing? The 5,000 role models will tell you proudly. Anytime.
It is now time to recognize our signature, premier, and diamond sponsors for the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence project. I'm going to ask that the school board members come and join me.
A man of action. Congressman Lewis was elected to Congress in November 1986 and has faithfully served the people of Georgia's 5th District since that time. He is a published author, having co-authored the #1 New York Times best-selling graphic novel memoir trilogy entitled March. In 2010, President Barack Obama presented Congressman Lewis the Medal of Freedom. Award, the highest civilian honor. The story of courage, great to the screens.
I saw Martin Luther King Jr. standing behind it at the beginning of his state that I was the right person. And that was the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of my involvement in the Civil Rights Movement.
Something clicked in the young John Lewis. Freedom was a possible dream. From Pike County, from the family farm, from this meeting came John Lewis, a new breed of American hero. Heroes that were willing to fight and die for freedom. It was time to move to the front of the bus, go to a better school, to eat at any lunch counter.
And we'd be sitting there at a lunch counter, orderly, not saying a word, and someone would come up and put a lighted cigarette out in our hair or down our backs, pull us off the lunch counter stool, start beating us, and then we would be charged with disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, and we were being very orderly, very peaceful.
But African Americans soon could use the lunch counter, and the movie houses were integrated. And again, John Lewis paid a price. 40 times he was jailed, and 40 times he emerged from jail to continue the fight for freedom.
I felt liberated. I felt free. I felt in the real sense that I had crossed over. I've been told over and over again by my parents and grandparents, don't get in trouble. But I got in trouble. It was good trouble. It was necessary trouble.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome great American hero and Congressman John Lewis.
Good morning. Thank you so much for those kind words of introduction. Thank you, Congresswoman Wilson, for inviting a poor boy from Georgia who was born and reared in rural Alabama to come to the state of Florida, to the beautiful city of Miami. I am delighted, very happy, and very pleased to be here. I prepared a speech, but I'm not going to use it. I've been deeply inspired by being here. Senator Rubio, thank you. Thank you for being here. Senator Nelson, to all of the honorable elected officials, the mayors, members of the school board, and to all of the young people, the role models, the judges, the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers. Thank you for finding a way to get in the way. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for being role models for these beautiful, handsome young men. I feel more than lucky. I feel honored and blessed to serve in the House of Representatives, to serve in the Congress of your elected official, but to be in the presence of Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson and my good friend and sister, Congresswoman Wilson. Sometime on a Wednesday, I come without a red tie, and she said, "John, where's your red tie?" I said, "I just didn't wear it today." She said, I'm going to get you another red tie. So I have another red tie. Thank you. I will have one from now on. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Young men, I grew up very, very poor in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little town called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, how many of you remember when you were 4? What happened to the rest of us? My father had saved $300, and a man sold him 110 acres of land. We still own this land today. On this farm, we raise a lot of cotton and corn, lots of peanuts. I don't eat too many peanuts today. Don't tell the people in Georgia where we raise a lot of peanuts. I ate so many peanuts when I was growing up, I just don't want to see no more peanuts. Sometime I would be out there working in the field, picking cotton, gathering peanuts, pulling corn. My mother would say, boy, you're falling behind. You need to catch up. And I would say, this is hard work. This is hard work. And she would say, hard work never kill anybody. I said, well, it's about to kill me. So as a little child, when I was growing up, my mother made me a what we call a book bag. We didn't have backpacks. We get up early in the morning, put my papers and books in my book bags, and hide under the front porch and wait for the school bus to come up the hill. And when I heard the school bus coming up, I would run out and get on the school bus and go off to school rather than to the field to work. Had a wonderful uncle, one of my mother's brothers, who told me to get an education. He inspired me. He went in the military and served and came back, finished college, and became a high school principal. He taught me. Had a wonderful teacher who told me in school, read, my child, read. And I tried to read everything. On the farm, it was my responsibility to take care for the chickens. Your congresswoman have heard me tell this story from time to time. I fell in love with raising chickens. I know some of you like chickens, right? We had eggs for breakfast, right? The eggs come from the chickens, right? But as a little boy, I fell in love with raising chickens. Any of you know anything about raising chickens? One young person there? Thank you. Place them under the setting hen and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. Some of you smart young, well, from time to time, another hen will get on that same nest. And there will be some more fresh eggs. You had to be able to tell the fresh eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. So do you follow me? So when the little chicks were hatched, I would fool these setting hens. Sometimes I would cheat on these setting hens. And when I look back on it, it was not the right thing to do. It was not the moral thing to do. It was not the most loving thing to do. It's not the most nonviolent thing to do. But I was never quite able to save $18.98 and order the most inexpensive incubator from the Cicero bookstore. Now, young man, you're not old enough to remember the Cicero bookstore, the Wush book. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. So I just kept on wishing. But as a little gospel, Santa Claus brought me a Bible. I learned to read the Bible. So from time to time, with the help of my room, and the chickens would gather in the chicken yard, but my brothers and sisters and cousins would gather outside, but around the chicken yard, and I would start speaking or preaching to the chickens. And when I look back on it, some of the chickens would bow their heads. Some of the chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. Senator Rubio is an exception. Your Congresswoman Wilson is an exception. And I tell you, those chickens inspired me because they listen. Listen to your teachers. Listen to your mothers and fathers. And be the best you can be. When I finished high school in May of 1957, 17 years old, I wanted to go off to college. There was a little college 10 miles from my home called Troy State College, now known as Troy University. Submitted my application, my high school transcript. I never heard a word from the college. But long before 1957 and 1955, heard of Rosa Parks, heard of Martin Luther King Jr. 1957, I met Rosa Parks. So because I didn't hear from this school, I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't tell my mother, my father, any of my sisters or brothers, any of my teachers. I told Dr. King I needed his help. He invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, I had been accepted at a little college in Nashville, Tennessee, where I spent 6 years studying at American Baptist College and Fisk University. So after being in Nashville for about 3 weeks, matter of fact, an uncle of mine, before I went to Nashville, gave me a $100 bill, gave me a Foot Locker, one of these big upright trunks, put my books, my clothing, everything except those chickens in that Foot Locker, and took a Greyhound bus to Nashville, Tennessee to study. I told one of my teachers that I've been in contact with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This teacher knew Dr. King. They studied together at Morehouse College in Atlanta. He informed Dr. King that I was there. Martin Luther King Jr. got back in touch with me and suggested when I was home for spring break to come and see him. On Saturday morning in March of 1958, I boarded a bus, traveled from Troy to Montgomery, and a young lawyer, young African-American lawyer by the name of Fred Gray, who was a lawyer for Rosa Parks, for Dr. King and the Montgomery movement, met me at the Greyhound bus station and drove me to the First Baptist Church in downtown Montgomery, pastored by the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and ushered me into the office of the church. I saw Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Ralph Abernathy standing behind a desk. And Dr. King said, "Well, you John Lewis? Are you the boy from Troy?" And I said, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." And he called me the boy from Troy. He told me, said, "John, if you attempt to continue your effort to enter Troy State, now known as Troy University, your parents could lose their land. Your home could be bombed or burned. Something could happen to you. But if you want to go, we will support you. Go back home and have a discussion with your mother and with your father." My mother was so afraid, my father was so afraid that they could lose the land. Home could be burned or bombed. So I continued to study in Nashville. And it was in Nashville, Tennessee, where Dr. King would come and speak. Rosa Parks would come and speak. Thurgood Marshall would come and speak at Fisk University, and others. And I got to know these individuals. And one day on Fisk University campus, Congresswoman Wilson was walking across the campus, and Dr. W. E. Du Bois was on the campus. And he said, "Hello, young man." And I said, "Hello, Dr. Du Bois." But being there inspired me to stand up, to speak up, and to speak out. with a group of students from O'Hara Medical College, from Fisk University, Tennessee State, from Vanderbilt and Peabody and Scarry and American Baptist. We start studying the way of peace, studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. We start sitting in lunch counters and restaurants to desegregate those places. Standing in at theaters. When I was growing up and you go downtown Troy or go to Montgomery to see a movie, all of us little black children had to go upstairs to the balcony. And all of the little white children went downstairs to the first floor. So I kept asking my mother, my father, my grandparents, and great-grandparents, why? They kept saying, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. So in Nashville, yes, I did get in trouble. I stood up, I spoke up, I spoke out, and I got arrested. And I said, you now. When they told us in Nashville if we continue to sit in, we may get arrested. I didn't have much money, but I wanted to look clean if I were going to go to jail. I wanted to look what some young men then called, I wanted to look fresh. I wanted to look sharp. So I went downtown to a used men's store and bought a suit, a used suit. A vest came with it. And if you have an opportunity to come to Washington and visit my congressional office, in the office is a large photograph of me being arrested for the first time. And I did look fresh. I did look clean. I did look sharp. So just think, a few short years ago, in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C., black people and white people, people of color, couldn't be seated together on a bus leaving the nation capital to travel through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court. Along the way, we were beaten and jailed. This is May 1961. My seatmate on that trip was a young white gentleman. We arrived in a little town called Rock Hill, South Carolina, and tried to enter a so-white waiting room, a so-called white waiting room. A group from the Klan attacked us and left us lying in a pool of blood. Many years later, to be exact, in February '09, one of the men that had beaten us came to my Capitol Hill office. He was in his 70s with his son in his 40s. And he said, Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people that beat you and your seatmate. I've been a member of the Klan. He said, I want to apologize. Will you accept my apology? Will you forgive me? And I said, sir, I accept your apology. I forgive you. His son started crying. He started crying. They hugged me. I hugged him back. And I started crying. It is the power of the way of peace, the way of love. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, hate is too heavy a burden to bear. And I said to you as young men, the future leaders of this state, the future leader of this nation, the future leader of the world, we must never, ever hate. The way of love is a better way. The way of peace is a better way. So I said to you as role models, never give up. Never give in. Stand up. Speak up. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something, to say something, and not be quiet. Yeah, we have come a distance. We made a lot of progress as a nation and as a people, but we're not there yet. The scars and stains of racism are deeply embedded in American society. We must not be at peace with ourselves as a nation until we have the change that Dr. King dreamed of. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know where I would be. I could still be down there in rural Alabama, maybe preaching to chickens. Hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I wouldn't be a member of the House of Representatives since 1987. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know what would have happened to our nation. He freed us. He helped liberate us to make our nation a better place, to make our world a better place. When we were planning a march on Washington in 1963, there was a man by the name of A. Philip Randolph, a native of the state, born in Jacksonville, Florida, moved to New York City and became a champion of civil rights, human rights, and labor rights. And Mr. Randolph would say over and over again as we met, he would say, brethren, maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great land in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. Dr. King would put it another way. It doesn't matter whether we're black or white, whether we're Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We are one people, we are one family. We all live in the same house, the American house, and we must look out for each other. You see it, if not, we will perish as fools. So I said to you, as we pause and remember Martin Luther King Jr., you must do your best. Stay in school. Study. Read. One of the teachers told me, read my child, read my child. And I tried to read everything. When I was growing up, we were too poor to have a subscription to the local newspaper, but my grandfather had one, and each day he would pass it on to us. You're more than lucky. You're blessed. We hadn't heard of the internet. Facebook? What is that? We didn't have cellular telephone. We had party line, have to wait till someone else got off the line. So use the instrument, use the tool, use your education. Get to know other role models. Thank your teachers. When I see law enforcement individuals, police officers, I say thank you for your service. When I see the TSA representatives, I say thank you for your service. Because they wear uniform, they have on badges. It's hard to say to our teachers sometimes, thank you, when you see them on the streets, see them on the store. They don't wear uniform. But say thank you to your teachers. Say thank you to your parents. Say thank you to people who are trying to help you. Let me close by saying, we all must become participants in the democratic process. When you get old enough to register to vote, go and register and vote. The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful, non-violent instrument or tool that we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. Just think a few short years ago, especially here in the American South, people trying to make it harder and difficult for people to register to vote. In my native state of Alabama and in places like Georgia, sometimes people ask to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap, to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. People in Selma, Alabama, and other parts of the South stood in what I call unmovable line. There were high school principals, college professors, lawyers, and doctors were told they could not read or write well enough. The only time that someone could even attempt to register to vote in Selma, Alabama, was the first and third Mondays of each month. We had to change that. When I spoke at the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, I was 23 years old. Had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter. I said, one person, one vote. That day when the march was all over, President Kennedy invited us down to the White House. He stood in the door of the Oval Office greeting each one of us. He kept saying, you did a good job, you did a good job. And when he got to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, you did a good job and you had a dream. That was my last time seeing the president. He was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. But 18 days after the march on Washington, there was a terrible bombing of the church in Birmingham, where 4 little girls were killed on a Sunday morning.
Will join us and offer some remarks this morning. Please come forward.
Do your part. Bend the arc. Thank you all very much. God bless you.
Gentlemen, thank you for providing advice, guidance, educational assistance. $971.76 for the five.
American hero and Congressman Lewis, one of the most extraordinary figures in America.
Florida will join us and offer some remarks this morning. Please come forward.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. Every year for the last 2 decades or more, I look forward to and feel honored.
It doesn't matter whether we're black or white, whether we're Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We are one people, we are one family. We all live in the same house, the American house, and we must look out for each other.
Waste of my time.
Congressman Lewis. Congressman.